Welcome to Unit 9, Civil War and Reconstruction, Lesson 3, Fort Sumter and the Battle of Bull Run. Imagine a hot, dry landscape where rain hasn't fallen for months. It would only take a spark to send the whole area up in flames. The spark that ignited the Civil War was the attack on Fort Sumter. The spark that caused the fire. President Abraham Lincoln declared that secession was illegal under the Constitution. Southerners, on the other hand, claimed secession as states' rights guaranteed by the document. They decided to secede because they perceived Lincoln's election as a threat to the lawful institution of slavery. After they split from the Union, the newly formed Confederate States declared that everything owned by the United States government within their boundaries now belonged to the Confederacy. Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina was among the possessions they claimed. Union Major Robert Anderson, who was in charge of the fort, had watched the people of Charleston get swept up in secession fever, and he was worried more than 5,000 Confederate soldiers surrounded Anderson and his men, and the Union soldiers were so low on provisions that they faced starvation. Lincoln sent a message to the Southern leaders stating that he was going to send food, but not weapons, to the soldiers at Fort Sumter. On April 11, 1861, before the Union's provisions arrived, Confederate leaders demanded that the Union troops evacuate, or leave, the fort. Otherwise, Confederate forces would take the stronghold by force. Lincoln and Anderson refused to agree on this demand, and the next day, Confederate forces began bombarding the fort from all sides. The shelling lasted for 34 hours. On April 14th, with no more food or ammunition, Anderson surrendered. War was unpopular among Northerners, but the attack stirred the Union to action. Lincoln declared South Carolina to be in rebellion and called to form a militia. The Civil War had begun. Its purpose then was not to end slavery, but to reunite the nation. Fort Sumter was built after the War of 1812 with Britain had revealed the need for added defense along the U.S. coast. The five-sided island fort was designed to protect Charleston Harbor. No one was killed during the 1861 bombardment of the fort, but 2 Union soldiers accidentally died during the 100-gun salute. The geography of the war. Within 2 days of Lincoln's call to arms, Virginia seceded. The Confederacy established its capital at Richmond, Virginia. Soon after, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina left the Union. However, 4 states bordering both the Union and the Confederacy, Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, and Kentucky, remained undecided. These states, called the border states, lay in the middle ground between the warring North and South, and so were very important geographically. Maryland, for example, bordered Washington, D.C. on 3 sides. If the state joined the Confederacy, the Union's capital would be completely surrounded by Confederate states. In an effort to keep Maryland in the Union, Lincoln threatened to jail any Confederate soldier who entered the state. Missouri was also vital to the Union cause. With its large population, Missouri could supply the Union with many soldiers. The state also produced a great deal of food and protected the western side of the Union. In addition, its biggest city, St. Louis, was an important commercial and transportation center. In Kentucky, both Confederate recruiters and pro-Union leaders tried to sway the state's citizens. But when Confederate forces invaded Kentucky in September 1861, the state asked the federal government for help. Lincoln sent troops to the state. The invaders were driven out, and Kentucky stayed in the Union. The president gained more ground when 50 counties in northwest Virginia decided to form a new state. The people in those counties no longer wanted to be part of a pro-slavery Virginia, and so, in 1863, West Virginia became part of the Union. Overall, Lincoln succeeded in keeping the border states in the Union. He would need all of the forces he could gather to prepare for war and fight the long, tough battles ahead. An early Confederate victory. Sometimes you jump into something before you're really ready. Without enough time to make a plan or devise a strategy, you can find that you just have to wing it. In a way, that's what happened to the Union and Confederate armies. Preparing for war. War had begun, but neither the Union nor the Confederacy was actually prepared for it. In April 1861, the Union forces included only 16,000 professional soldiers, while the Confederacy had fewer than 2,000. Both sides quickly took steps to mobilize or organize and prepare troops for active service. The North and the South enlisted troops at the local and state levels. A local leader would encourage men to join and serve under his command, or a group of men would get together and elect their commander. Many military units also formed along ethnic lines. Some northern regiments consisted only of European immigrants who communicated in their native language. Germans were the largest European immigrant group fighting for the Union. European immigrants also fought for the South, and the Texas Regiment consisted of Mexicans called the Tejas, soon joined the Confederate cause as well. Mobilization helped swell the ranks on both sides, but neither army was at full strength. The Battle of Bull Run. The armies were put to the test in July 1861. Hoping to bring a swift end to the war, Lincoln decided to send Union forces to seize Richmond. To carry out his plan, Lincoln first ordered General Irvin McDowell to attack the Confederate forces in Manassas, Virginia, a town less than 100 miles from Richmond. McDowell and his troops were in Washington, D.C., only 40 miles east of Manassas. But McDowell didn't believe his 35,000 volunteers were ready for battle, so he and his troops left Washington, D.C. more than a week later than planned. When the Confederate general stationed in Manassas, PGT Beauregard, learned of the delay, he sent for help. Soon, 11,000 more Confederate soldiers arrived to strengthen his forces. The battle began on July 21st when Union forces crossed a small creek called Bull Run to attack the Confederates. As the Confederate soldiers charged, they unleashed a high-pitched battle cry that could be heard for miles. The ear-splitting cry came to be known as the Rebel Yell. Many Union soldiers wrote in letters and diaries about the terror the scream inspired. During the battle, Confederate General Thomas Jackson and his forces filled a gap in the line of Confederate soldiers. He held the line so bravely that another general told his men to take heart from the sight of Jackson, standing like a stone wall. Jackson would be known by the nickname Stonewall Jackson for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, J.B. Stuart, the leader of the Virginia Confederate Cavalry, or soldiers on horseback, watched Union movements on a hill overlooking the battlefield. At a critical point in the battle, Stuart's cavalry charged and scattered the Union infantry, or foot soldiers. The charge forced the Union troops to retreat to Washington, D.C. The Confederacy won the battle, but both sides suffered heavy casualties, about 3,000 soldiers for the North and more than 1,700 for the South. Another battle at Bull Run would take place more than a year later. Once again, the Confederates under General Robert E. Lee would win, but with staggering casualties, nearly 15,000 for the Union and 9,000 for the Confederacy. These extremely high casualty rates continued to make the war unpopular in the North. Lincoln knew it would be a long and grueling war. Robert E. Lee was born in a celebrated Virginia family. Robert E. Lee wanted to make a name for himself. He enrolled in the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in New York and was one of only 6 soldiers in his class who graduated with a clean record of behavior. After graduating, Lee met and married a descendant of Martha Washington, George Washington's wife. During the Mexican-American War, Lee impressed his commanding officer, General Winfield Scott, with his keen military mind. He became an officer in the Confederate Army after turning down Lincoln's offer to command the Union Army. His loyalty to his home state outweighed the president's request. Just a quick review before we end this video. Once the northern states declared war and the southern states had seceded, the country waited to see whether the states in between would remain in the Union. Confederate forces gained an early victory by winning the Battle of Bull Run. Thomas Jackson held the Confederate lines so well that another general told his men to take heart from the sight of Jackson, standing like a stone wall, that they called him Stonewall Jackson for the rest of his life. Robert E. Lee was the general for the Confederacy, the South, during the Civil War. That's all for today's video.